I have to admit, I didn't really check to make sure that I had all my equipment working right here on the table before you, but I think it is. So we're going for it now. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Old Man Squad Fantasy Basketball. Congratulations if your head-to-head leagues just ended and you're continuing to listen. That means you're a true fantasy degenerate, and I love to have you around. Some of you have head-to-head leagues that are still going. Those of you that definitely are still going are my Roto Games Cap pals. And so we're going to try to retool things just a little bit, not a lot, just a little bit, not a lot of it, to, I don't want to say that we're going to focus more on the Roto Games Cap side of things, but I think it will get a little bit more attention here these last 3 weeks because most of you head-to-headers should probably be done right now. We will still have a weekly preview show coming up later today. I've thought it through, and I'm not going to do these like everyday double dip streaming shows. We're going to probably do those every other day. And what I'd like to do is still do a few more specialty shows kind of in between. But let's just launch into today's stuff. This is the weekend review episode of Old Man Squad Fantasy Basketball. Please hit that subscribe button. Find me on Twitter at Dan Vespers if you're still floating around and doing fantasy basketball stuff. But most importantly, again, like and subscribe. That is the big one. Let's get to it. These are the ads coming out of the weekend. There are so many that I could not fit them on one zoomed-in page here, but we're going to move through them one by one. We also have a massive list of guys that are super-duper close. We have a nice watch list. So this one is a lot of names, and we're just going to try to get through it as fast as we can. Some of them require no explanation, like Anthony Davis and Amen Thompson. Both those guys, Thompson is back from injury. Anthony Davis got upgraded to questionable as of about an hour ago. Pretty incredible stuff. But the thing is, like, everybody sucks so hard from the 10 seed down in the Western Conference that the Mavs are tied with the Suns. Phoenix has won a few games in a row. They've had a slightly easier schedule of late. But the Mavericks, like, we're at the 3-week mark, and you figured by this point they'd be well out of it with everybody hurt. But they've been, I don't want to say good enough to hang in there, but the teams around them have been bad enough that allowed the Mavericks to hang in there long enough to now for Anthony Davis to go, you know what, I'll come back. Maybe we can fight our way into the play-in spot. I don't really understand it from like an organizational standpoint, but if he wants to play, and they're going to let him. So make sure he's not out on your waiver wire. He might have gotten dropped in a lot of leagues because of how long he's been out and the expectation that he might just sit out the rest of the way. The rest of these names require a little bit of an explanation. Dennis Schroder is the next one on my ads board. That's because Cade Cunningham missed their last game, the Pistons' last game, that is, with some calf soreness. We don't have an official ruling on it. But that's a soft tissue spot, and we know that that type of thing can linger. The Pistons are in a very nice spot right now where they're a solid 4.5 games up on the Hawks to be in the playoff and not the play-in. So there's kind of no reason to push Cade if he's not quite ready to go. Meaning you might get another spot start out of Dennis Schroder. You might not. With I don't know. I haven't had an update this morning. But again, if you want to kind of get out in front of this one, they play, I guess it'd be tomorrow? Yeah. They play tomorrow. They don't have a great schedule this week. But again, like, more of this is about games cap stuff right now. So I want you guys thinking about it from a couple different standpoints. And for that one is if you get a full Dennis Schroder start, you know that he can put up some pretty good size numbers, as we saw at the beginning of this season, frankly, when he was sort of unimpeded. Jose Alvarado is another point guard that I think is worth rostering right now. He's basically taken the starting job since Trey Murphy went down for the year. His numbers have been inconsistent since moving into the starting five. He's outside the top 200 over the last couple of weeks because he's shooting 34%. He's missed all of his free throws, and the steals are not up high where you'd expect them to be. But that stuff is going to sort of inch its way up as the minutes, I would assume, continue to tick up. He had that weird 18-minute game where they got blown out by Minnesota, but he played 28 in their last one and had 10 and 8 with a couple of steals and a couple of threes. He's also really like one usage guy, being not in the lineup away from being a very, very good fantasy play. And those are the guys that you often want to take a chance on, because if they're that close to being something like very helpful, then you want to be there when they're only a little bit helpful and catch the upside when it falls your way. Kelly Olynyk, if we're going to stay in New Orleans, is a guy that, you guys know me. He's not as easy to roster in head-to-head because there are probably going to be some off days here and there. Although, looking back, today will be the test. This is the second half of a back-to-back for the Pels, and then they're off for a bunch of days in a row. His minutes are not super high. They're not trying to run him into the ground, but he's just so versatile that even 25, 26 minutes is enough for Kelly. And so he's a guy that I like to have on my rosters, specifically in 9-cat Roto. Kel'el Ware is back in the starting lineup as about, 2-3 games back. I think we talked about this one already, but just make sure nobody didn't drop him when he got benched. And if they did, which, by the way, would have been justified because he was terrible when he was coming off the bench for the Heat, make sure that he's been re-added to rosters. Guys, we're right in the middle of March Madness, and for some reason I can't unstuff my nose, but you know what you can stuff also is your wallet with cash by hanging out with our friends at Bet Online, the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for March Madness betting here in 2025. Whether you're a seasoned fan or a first-time bettor, Bet Online is your ultimate game day companion. They've got the largest selection of odds on everything from college basketball to a $200,000 bracket contest that you probably should have gotten your butt into before, but you might have missed out on that already. You won't miss out on it again, will you? But you know what? If you got a Cinderella story that you think is making a deep run, Bet Online is the place to get down on it. They've got every Cinderella story. They've got every hat trick. Baseball starts for real in a couple of days. They'll have every baseball play you can get down on. Live odds, props, and more with stats as well on every game, every play, and every win. Bet Online. The game starts here. Back into the names we go. Moses Moody and Brandin Podziemski are the next names on the list, and everybody on Twitter was like, Dan, you bleeping bleeper. Those guys barely play at the beginning of this week. Guess what? I don't care because you shouldn't be in your head-to-head playoffs anyway. You should be Roto games capping your way to victory. Steph Curry was out for the Warriors last ball game. He hurt his back in a fall in the prior one. It was not a rest day. If he's back by this next game in Miami tomorrow, call that a win. That'll be my younger son's 5th birthday, by the way, tomorrow. So happy birthday, Theo. I expect Steph will miss a little bit more time. The Warriors have been playing so well that they can probably afford to be a little bit careful. I'm sure they'd love to be out of the play-in, which they are by a half game right now. So there's not a ton of wiggle room, but I think they feel like, if we wait, we get him right. We can win a few games down the stretch. We'll be able to lock ourselves up into that 6th seed. We'll see, I guess. But as long as Steph is out, Moody moves into the range of guys you should start. Podziemski is a guy you should be starting anyway. Keon Ellis. Oh, the magic of Afrin. I paused the podcast to use Afrin, and I'm going to get addicted, but here we are. Afrin, by the way, if you'd like to sponsor the show, I'd love to have you. Keon Ellis and Jonas Valanciunas are your Kings plays right now. Ellis, because Malik Monk missed the Kings last ball game. That, again, is only as a fill-in play. If Keon is starting, you get him into your lineup. If he's not, you don't. Monk missed their last one Saturday. Sorry, I'm going to lose track of days here. He was sick, so we don't really know how fast he's going to be back. If he misses another one, you get Ellis in there. JV is somebody that everybody yelled at me about on Twitter. I put him on my ads board last time, even after a bad ball game. Everybody's like, but he sucked in the last one. I'm like, yeah. But guess what? They don't have much of a choice. So that's why you stick with guys that have a starting job. Listen, you guys know I was down on JV this year. So reel it back farther. I was actually high on him right after the Wizards signed him, and then he got overdrafted, and I ended up with him no place. Very low on him coming to Sacramento, but you have to be able to be malleable. So I wanted him when his price was like 115 on draft night. I didn't want him when he was getting drafted in the 80s. So thank the good Lord I had 0 Jonas Valanciunas in Washington this year, as he just piddled around in that 125 range. And they had no job in Sacramento. But then, you can't. Everybody overreacts to one ball game. That's why we're able to capitalize so often in fantasy basketball. Is so many teams are just like, this is over. Even though he was starting still. In any event, Kevin Huerter, I think, still deserves a spot on rosters. I know that the Bulls are getting some guys back here, like they're and Josh Giddey is starting again and putting up these big numbers, but Huerter is still playing. And it's that 11 shot threshold for him. If he's getting 11 field goal attempts, he's worth rostering, and he is right now. I put Naji Marshall on this list. I don't think he got dropped in that many spots, but the Mavericks had such a terrible schedule last week that there probably were a few leagues where Naji got dropped just because he wasn't playing enough. Like he's available in all of the head-to-head leagues that I was in last week. So if you're in one that's continuing now, where like maybe last week was your semifinals instead of your finals, that's a guy you want to look and make sure he didn't get dropped. We're heading into Phoenix for a moment, and that is for Ryan Dunn, the young fella. He is not, Reed, he is not a play if you need much beyond defensive stats. Lately, he has hit a couple of three-pointers, but his value is heavily tied up in the fact that he's going to get wide open shots. So hopefully, even though he's not a great shooter yet, it won't be back-breakingly bad. He's scored in double figures in 5 games in a row, which is kind of notable. But that's not what you're relying on. He's going to get you about 5 rebounds. He's a good steals guy and a good blocks guy. And if you can wedge in a dozen points, well, that makes it all the merrier. And that's why he's been a top 75 guy over the last week, is because he's at 14 points per game and 6.5 rebounds. I think those numbers probably come down a little bit, but the steals and blocks probably stay around potentially 1 apiece. And so I think he makes a lot of sense in a lot of formats as kind of like a specialist plus type of guy. And the last 2 names on the ads board are the 2 Grizzlies, much like Phoenix and Dallas didn't play for the last couple of days, so guys that might pop up on waiver wires. Scotty Pippen Jr. and Santi Aldama. Don't worry, Luke Kennard is in the next category, so he's not gone yet. The Scotty Pippen one is very much tied to Ja Morant being out. I don't want to run Pippen out there against the games cap if Ja is playing. But with Ja down the last few, Pippen's put up some big assist numbers in one of them. He's an amazing steals guy, and he's actually shooting the ball okay lately, which is kind of the barometer of whether you could start him in all formats or just some. And while he's warm, he's a terrific play, but he gets blocks out of the point guard spot as well. He's averaging almost a block a game over the last 2 weeks, actually. And he's around 2 steals a game over that stretch. And then with Aldama, this is one where you guys have heard me go back and forth on him basically all season long. He's been so banged up the second half of the year that we haven't really been able to see him kind of cut loose, but he had a really good ball game in the last one. And again, if guys miss time for Memphis, if usage guys are out, that just leaves more for someone like a Santi Aldama. So I think he does belong on rosters. I might be a little bit nervous about deploying him against a games cap. I'll be honest on that front. But he should be on rosters, especially while there's a little bit of extra stuff to do. Take a quick commercial break, and then we'll get to the guys that are super duper, ooper duper, very, very, very close. The very close list is 9 names long, and as I've said on most of our recent recap shows, if you guys feel that these dudes belong on your roster, you go right ahead. Very close means exactly what it says. They are very close to being ads in my book, meaning that in a lot of books, they're ads, and that's totally fine. Kyle Filipowski is the first name on the list. I can't quite figure out when he's going to have his good games when Walker Kessler's in. It's pretty obvious when he's going to have his good games when Kessler's out. And then in games cap formats, like there is a value in having a guy like that where you just run him out there when you know he's going to have a big ball game. And then, if your league is still rolling it head to head, there's probably enough good ones blended in. Utah's starting or finishing up a back-to-back, so I would assume that this would be a game today where Filipowski plays pretty well, and then they play a terrible team on Wednesday before 3 or 4 more good opponents again. Wait a minute. Hold on. I'm all discombobulated. They're not in a back-to-back today. Their back-to-back is Thursday, Friday of this week. Excuse me, guys. Come on, Dan. Get your head out of your rectum. Not enough space in there for a head anyway. They got Memphis on Tuesday, so you might still see Kessler there. Then they've got the back-to-back. So you'll get at least one Filipowski game in that little zone, but who knows? Maybe there's more. Chuma Okeke is not a name I thought I was going to put on a very close board this year, but yet here we are. He started for Philly in his last ball game and played 35 minutes. He's played 37, 31, and 35 in his last 3 ball games. He is, be very clear here, not a very good NBA basketball player, but historically, and I know we're not talking about a massive sample size, but he's been in and around the NBA for half a decade now. Historically, he is a very good steals guy. And if he's playing 30-some-odd minutes, he's almost definitely going to end up with more than 1 steal per ball game. He's also showing some pretty damn good rebounding chops, and some of that's because Philly has no real center left on the roster, so that's a little easier for, an oversized shooting guard or small forward to go get a couple of rebounds. But you're going to get boards. You're probably going to get some defensive stats out of Okeke, and then Philly's just so damn bad right now that they almost have no choice but to let him take 6 to 8 shots per game, which whatever that equates to, probably 6 to 8 points because he's not a very good offensive player. But he's just out there right now. It's the old Marvin Williams theorem, which states that if you're a particular type of fantasy player and you get 30 minutes a game, you're just going to have value. But he's close for me right now. I don't know if he could get a goose egg in his next ball game. Alex Caruso, is he now the official Chet Holmgren fill-in guy? Maybe, but we got to know when we're doing it. That's the important part right now. Holmgren was out. Could miss another one. We'll see. But Caruso played 30 minutes in a start in the last ball game, which was wild. For Holmgren, it was a hip here. Everybody in OKC is dealing with hip stuff right now. We know he's not going to play in back-to-backs. This one was not a back-to-back. So he was actually hurt, is what I'm telling you, because he played in the Charlotte game and then missed the Clippers game. If he was resting, it would have been in the game that they could win with their eyes closed. If Caruso starts again, then you got to get him in there. Payne is on the list, but that's only because New York is down to their 3rd string point guard now. Deuce McBride was a game-time call. He ended up sitting out the last one for the Knicks. Jalen Brunson is still out, obviously. If Deuce is back for the next one, then you're not going to play Payne. If Deuce is still out, which, by the way, they're off today again, so the Knicks had 2 games off or 2 days off between ball games, then you get Cam into your lineup. So, again, this is one where you kind of have to wait and see what's going down. Gary Trent Jr. is, he's more of a threes streamer, and that's really only a trustworthy one while Damian Lillard is on the shelf. So I don't think I'd go too far down that path. But again, some of you guys are looking for specialists. Spencer Dinwiddie has been on a heater lately, and we know heater Dinwiddie is a fun player to roster, specifically in punt builds, because he's like a first rounder over the last week and a half. But he's shooting 50. What's he shooting over his last 2.5 games? 54% from the field on high volume, 88% at the free throw line on high volume. He's at 24 and 10 with 2.5 steals over that stretch. But again, remember, Dallas has only played 2 games over the last week, and Dinwiddie went crazy in one of them. He's been warm, though. He's been warm for about 5-6 games in a row. And so that's, top 40 type of production. But we know what it looks like when the bottom falls out. He goes on a 75% free throw run and a 35% field goal run, and it's ugly. So what do? Well, if you need points and assists, you kind of play him regardless. If you don't need those things, I remain pretty damn nervous about the game-to-game outlook. And if AD comes back, then that sucks a lot of the usage out of the thing. But again, you know your team. I don't know your team. And I don't, frankly, want to know all of your teams because it would make my brain explode. But, I didn't need Dinwiddie on the team where I just won the finals. I needed him on the one that lost in the semifinals. You know your team. I had an opportunity to pick him up everywhere. I picked him up in 1 out of 2 head-to-head spots, and I didn't pick him up in any of my roto leagues because I know the day that as soon as I deploy him against the games cap, he's going to piss down his leg. Kai Jones, his teammate, is on this list. That's definitely not going to be the case if Anthony Davis makes a return. So don't do anything there until you find out what AD is up to. Tyus Jones, as long as we're in the Jones corridor right now, had a better ball game for Phoenix, but a lot of their guys sat that one out. So I'm going to wait and see what the next one looks like before making any kind of actual move here. And then Luke Kennard, which, again, he hasn't done a whole lot with Ja out, which is kind of unusual. He'd been quite good pretty much any time that Morant had sat in recent memory. Although his last game was decent. Kennard, 15 points and 3 steals, 3 threes. He'd just been on kind of like an I'm not hitting that many three-pointers stretch, which is very weird because he's one of the best three-point shooters in the NBA. And typically, when Morant is out, Kennard is going to play 25 to 32 minutes and get you a few threes and 5, 6, 7 assists and a steal, and that's been a playable mark. Memphis doesn't play today, so again, you're not probably going to do a whole lot with it today. But if you wanted to get out in front of it and have him in case you get another opportunity for a Kennard start tomorrow, okay. Let's go to the watch list now after our second commercial break. The watch list we like to move through a little faster because these guys are just dudes we're keeping an eye on. Jordan Hawkins in New Orleans. That's really in case they start to shut a bunch of people down, and they might. Sounds like a bunch of guys for the Pels are likely to get a breather here coming up. They have a back-to-back that started yesterday. Then they're finishing up with Philly in their own house tonight. Then they're off for 3 days. So again, head-to-head side, difficult decision to make there. But Roto, like if you wanted to deploy a bunch of the healthy dudes against the games cap tonight, they're probably all going to have more usage than they know what to do with. And it's going to be a competitive game because they're playing another team that doesn't give a crap. Jeremiah Robinson-Earl, same explanation pretty much. Davion Mitchell in Miami put up a big ball game, but he's just on the watch list for me because Miami picked on a team that isn't really an NBA team right now. Julian Champagnie, that's the Champagnie down in San Antonio. He also has a very, like Justin, both have really nice fantasy games, but we just need to know that they're going to have consistent minutes. And I don't know that, so I can't tell you to do anything with him yet. Sam Hauser for Boston is putting up big numbers because the Celtics have been without one or multiple players in recent ball games. He is still, for the most part, a threes streamer only. Every once in a while, some other stuff falls into place, but you can't count on it. And even in his last Giant game where he hit 8 threes, he only had 3 rebounds and 1 block over 40 minutes of action. So legitimately, all he does is stand at the three-point line. And sometimes that's useful, like when he hits 8 or 9 of them, but a lot of times it ain't. Justin Edwards, over to the Phillies side now. I've been bouncing around teams, I guess. He's been scoring better lately. I just have a lot of trouble saying this is a guy that you must have on your roster. But he's on a nice little run. 4 games in a row. He's shot the ball pretty well. He's getting a lot of usage over that stretch, which it's a little bit of a crapshoot in Philly these days. But 18 points, 19, 25, 22. He has 13 threes, 3 blocks, and 3 steals and 4 blocks over those games. He has about 10, 11 assists, something in that neck of the woods. So we're seeing some decent numbers, but it also kind of feels like they could just vanish overnight. So I am a little nervous on Justin Edwards. If you wanted to push him up the board 1 rung, that's okay. He's probably the best name on this watch list. DeAndre Jordan made the watch list because he got a spot start for Denver. They finally decided not to go small ball Aaron Gordon at the 5. And even if DeAndre Jordan gets another start, I think I'd still be too nervous to play him. Quinten Post in Golden State has been decent yet lately. Like if you need threes out of a center, that's probably the way to go. Modest Buzelis was very, very good for Chicago against the Lakers, but also everybody was. Lakers did not play defense in that game. And it was one of those nights where, like, even a team that's not playing much defense, usually the other team will miss eventually, and Chicago just never missed. They made every shot they took. It was pretty unbelievable. Like Like, you name the player, they were bombing away from everywhere on the floor. And Buzelis hit 5 threes. I think the Bulls went 8 for 9 on threes in the third quarter alone. So this might be the best game of the rookie year that Buzelis put up. But keep an eye on it. Like, what if they do decide to just give him 30 minutes a game? That's sort of a different beast. If he gets super aggressive and starts taking 15, 16 shots a night, that's a different thing. He's been not a startable fantasy player up until like this last game, basically. And even over the last week, he's outside the top 130, despite this giant game, because he's done pretty much nothing besides score and hit threes. We just got to get something else. But again, if he goes out there and he takes that number of shots nightly, 14, 15 shots, then that's a totally different story. Wendell Carter Jr. is on my watch list. I don't trust that dude as far as I can throw him. He's been rebounding pretty well lately, so that's something, but he just does nothing else. And Max Christie, who I thought, frankly, would be better more consistently in Dallas, has just shot the ball terribly. And I think you can put some of that on the fact that he hasn't had a superstar to get him open. His game, his fantasy game, his reality game, isn't ready for him to be a guy that's guarded closely. He needs to be the dude who's camping out and cutting off of superstars, and Dallas lost all their superstars. So it just, from a fit standpoint, it just went down the toilet. Also, just a bonus marker here, I give you permission to drop Scoot Henderson and any streamers you might have on the Lakers, which probably includes Jackson Hayes. Rui Hachimura's minutes are going to be ramped up slowly, but the Lakers don't have to go big as often. Still, if Jackson gets 25, 26 minutes with Luka and LeBron and Reeves feeding him dunks, I think he probably still profiles as a startable fantasy play because dude's shooting like 80% since the Lakers made all these moves near the trade deadline. And you almost don't have to do anything else. If you're making 4 out of every 5 shots, you can be a kind of a one-trick pony. I know the volume is not all that high, but that's a big field goal percent boost, even on low volume, if that makes any sense. Like, he's done almost nothing. He's shot 44%, by the way, at the free throw line over the last 2 weeks, and he's still ranked inside the top 180 because he's shooting almost 80% at a field goal clip. In fact, you could organize it. If you go to Basketball Monsters player rank page and you look to see who's had like big field goal percent impact, over the last 2 weeks, Jackson Hayes is number 10. On 6 shots per game. The only other player who's in that realm is Adem Bona, who's been hurt lately, but he shot 75% on 6.7 shots per game. Most of these other guys that are having big field goal percent impact are guys that are taking, anywhere from 9 to 18 shots a night. Ty Jones making every shot of 8. Anyway, that's not the point. So if Jackson Hayes stops shooting 44% at the free throw line, I do actually think he could still be a fantasy play on the shoulders of really like 2 categories. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is our weekend recap edition of Old Man Squad Fantasy Basketball. Please subscribe. I forgot to do it in the middle of the show. I've been trying to get better about that. For a while, I set an alarm on my phone to remind me right in the middle of the show to say, hey, remember to subscribe, everyone, while you're listening right now, because a lot of you have tuned out by this point. You get to minute 29. A lot of folks are not listening. But hopefully you guys are still subscribing. We are approaching 7,100 subs, which I thought if we could get to like 4,000 or 5,000 on year one, it would be a huge success. And the fact that we're still trickling in subs here at the end of the season, 3 weeks to go, I don't know. Can we get to 7,200? Probably not, but we're going to push it. And if you're finding us and you're liking it, please do hit that button. In a couple of hours today, we're going to come back. We're going to do a weekly preview show that also does a streamer coverage on Monday and Tuesday. And that way we can do our next streamer show on Wednesday. And that will allow us to do a recap show tomorrow. And then we can also squeeze in some other specialist type of shows. Things, maybe particular guys that are great at 1 or 2 categories. We can look at sort of the Yahoo Trends board. We've had all these shows that I did during the meat of the season that we haven't really been able to do lately because for those playoff weeks, I really wanted to make sure we were hammering the streamer stuff. So, injury shows, trending shows, drops shows. There are all these end of season type of shows that I want to try to get in, best draft pick of the year, best pickup of the year, guys we should never draft again. Like, these are fun types of shows that if we wait and do them in the offseason, then you guys are all going to miss them. Which, by the way, brings us to the last point. While I'm reminding you to subscribe again, we do shows all off season long. So I'm not going away when this regular season's over. It's just going to be at a slightly lower frequency of activity. I'm Dan Baspers on Twitter, Old Man Squad on Blue Sky. Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you guys in a couple hours with a weekly preview show. So long for now.